The Memphis Grizzlies have been one of the most interesting and underrated teams in the past year, and no one is talking about it. Now I know, there have been many other young teams like the Knicks and Hornets that have been getting the media attention, but the fact is, this Grizzlies team and what they have are just as exciting as all the other teams I mentioned. Not only that, but this team actually surprised everyone, unlike the Hornets, and made it through the play-in game, beating the Golden State Warriors, which to say the least is not an easy matchup. But even though this team lost to the one-seeded Jazz in the first round, they played some great basketball, which has led many to believe that they are just one solid piece away from being a consistent playoff team for the future. And today we will be discussing the offseason plan for the Grizzlies and what they should do if they want to keep building around what they have. But before we get into that, fun fact, over 95% of you guys who've been watching the content consistently aren't even subscribed. So if you just subscribed, if you're new and join the Woods crew, not only will you get amazing NBA content daily, but you'll also help me get one step closer to going full time and making videos like this every single day. Also, leaving a like below if you end up enjoying the content also helps in a big way. But with that being said, let's just get right into this young Grizzlies team and what the next step is for them as far as building a contending team. It's no secret that this team has one of the most electric players in the league in Ja Morant, and in the playoffs this year he showed that he can take his game to another level and play like a superstar. So obviously everything this team will be doing is to build around Ja and the rest of their young core. But not only was Morant amazing in the playoffs, but there were also some other unexpected players on this team. In particular, I'm talking about Dillon Brooks. It's no secret that Dillon Brooks broke through all expectations the Grizzlies had for him this season and solidified himself as one of the best two-way players on the team, and maybe even in the league. Luckily for the Grizzlies, Brooks is locked in until after the 2023 season, so it looks like for now, Memphis has their two young guards for the future, along with Kyle Anderson, who has also been amazing to say the least. And I know Brooks plays at the small forward, but he could handle the ball like a guard, so I'll just keep that in mind. But don't let that fool you, because this team still has a lot of moves they should make to better their roster and solidify themselves as a legit playoff team for years to come. As of right now, the Grizzlies have almost all of their guys on the books for next year, which is why they only have just over $8 million to work with in free agency, but the first thing they should do in my eyes is clear what they can and upgrade where they need it. And that starts with Justice Winslow. Justice Winslow only played 26 games with the Grizzlies last year due to injury, but he has a team option for $13 million this year. So if the Grizzlies decline this deal, their cap space shoots up to over $21 million, which is a lot more room to work with and could get them what they need to be a legit playoff team. Don't get me wrong here, Winslow was solid in the games he played, but the fact is, this Grizzlies team needs guys who can consistently be on the court, and they showed that they are completely fine, if not better, without Winslow on their lineup, because my man was out of the rotation after the month of May. If the Grizzlies decline this option and get $21 million like I said, they will be in a way better position to get some solid players in free agency. But what exactly does this team need? Well, it's clear that the Grizzlies are ready for the next phase of their rebuild, and honestly, I think that this team is in a very similar situation to what the Jazz were just a few years ago. I'm not sure if you guys remember, but right after the Jazz got Donovan Mitchell and paired him with Rudy Gobert, they weren't the powerhouse team like they are now. I mean, they had Gobert and Mitchell and a solid supporting crew, but it wasn't enough to get them where they wanted to be. But then, this team made some sneaky good moves, adding guys like Mike Conley, Jordan Clarkson, and Bogdanovich to their roster, which sent the previous starters to the bench and made them a very deep team. In my eyes, this is what Memphis needs to do as well, build around their young star with depth and, more importantly, shooting. Now, this situation is a bit different for the Grizzlies because they already have their guys at the point guard position, unlike the Jazz, but they still do need depth and shooting. Like I said, Ja Morant made it clear that his three ball is improving, but for spacing and the fact that Ja might not be lights out like he was in the playoffs this year, this team needs to target some shooters, and in my eyes, there's no better player to sign than Duncan Robinson of the Miami Heat. If you guys didn't know, Duncan Robinson will be a free agent this year, and even though he's restricted, it looks like Miami Heat cannot afford him and he'll more than likely take his talents elsewhere. Robinson has quickly become one of the best shooters in the league, drawing comparisons to Joe Harris, except, well, he's taller, and if he could learn to defend, would be a definition of a 3-and-D guy. If you guys have watched Duncan hoop, you would know that all he needs is 1 second to get a shot off, and it's safe to say that getting someone like him would open up the offense for the Grizzlies in a big way. Reports have been saying that Duncan will be looking for a long-term deal around $15 million a year, and in my eyes, this would be a much better player to snag than keeping Justice Winslow on his $13 million contract. Duncan would be able to ignite this Grizzlies offense in the starting lineup and give them way more depth by sending whoever this team chooses to come off the bench and let Duncan Robinson start. With Ja Morant and Valanciunas constantly drawing attention in the paint, Robinson would be a great outlet for this team for easy buckets, and would actually make their offense a lot harder to guard. But the best part about this signing is that it's actually realistic. Duncan Robinson recently came out and said that he does not care if his team is a large market or small market. All he cares about is fit, the money, and if he can be comfortable with this team in the long run. To me, this would be perfect for the Grizzlies, an offensive juggernaut that's on the same timeline as their young core of Ja, Brooks, and Jared Jackson Jr. Now, there are other shooters like Danny Green who are a good fit as well, but these kind of guys aren't on the same timeline as the team, usually want to contend for a ring, and Duncan Robinson, well, he wants to get his bag before he does any of that, which is why this is so realistic. But if the Grizzlies don't get Duncan Robinson, there are still plenty of other other solid options in that same $15 million a year range. Guys like Kelly Oubre, TJ McConnell, Malik Monk, and more are all guys that could help this team in some way and improve their roster overall. But if the Grizzlies do this, that leaves around $6 million to work with. And in my eyes, what this team needs to do instead of letting it go to waste is get some veteran talent that can be leaders for this young team in their early playoff years. It's no secret that this Grizzlies team is super young, and honestly, Jonas Valanciunas is the only guy who's even close to old at the age of 29. So this team needs to get some veterans to help the young guys out. Some notable names I believe would be great fits for the Grizzlies are guys like Jeff Green, Garrett Temple, and Paul Millsap. And even though these guys would cost more than veteran minimums, they would be a great fit for this team and help them get the tight-knit playoff squad they need for the future. But even though getting someone like Duncan and some veterans is the ideal offseason for this team, in my eyes, there is someone that they could get that would not only bring elite shooting, but also veteran presence that a lot of people are sleeping on. That player being JJ Redick, who to say the least seems like he would be the perfect fit for this Grizzlies team. I'm not gonna lie, whether or not the Mavs win against the Clippers and make a deep playoffs run, I think that JJ Redick is as good as gone after this season. When he was traded at the deadline, he made it clear that he did not like how the Pelicans did him dirty. And even though he had nothing against playing for Dallas, for personal reasons, being traded to a team that was far down south and even further away from his home in New York angered him a lot. But the fact is, he has hinted that he'd like to join the Nets, especially because of the fact that they are contenders for at least the next few years. But if the Grizzlies are able to give him a decent contract, there is a world where he accepts it and helps this young core grow while providing shooting that this team needs. So if Duncan Robinson re-signs with the Heat or goes elsewhere, this is a great option for this team in my eyes, even if JJ Redick is getting up there in age. But aside from the players that the Grizzlies should target, they have some big decisions to make with their roster in the future. If you guys didn't know, some of the key pieces on this team in Jaren Jackson Jr. and Tyus Jones will be on the last year of their deal this summer, which means that they are eligible for an extension if the Grizzlies want to give them long-term plans. In my eyes, it's a no-brainer to bring back Jaren Jackson. I mean, him and Ja have the chance to become the next dominant dynamic duo in the league, and this team could probably offer him a slightly discounted extension because of the fact that he's missed a lot of time in the NBA so far, and he'll more than likely accept if it's a long deal because that means guaranteed money for him. The big question for me is Tyus Jones, because like I said, with Ja, Kyle Anderson, and other guys like Dylan Brooks, it seems like there might not be room for someone like Tyus in their long-term future, especially if he wants to be a starting guard for a team. I'm gonna be honest, I like Tyus, I really do. I honestly was pretty salty when the Timberwolves let him go because he was the backup point guard we needed badly. But for the Grizzlies, if Tyus wants a pay increase, I just don't know if I would do it at this point because it's looking like I'd rather have Grayson Allen as the main guard off the bench because his shooting has been so good. So for me, it's simple. Extend Jaren Jackson Jr. to solidify your young core for the future and wait on Tyus or even try and trade him for some assets. Aside from the minor moves though, I think that this team should stick to what they have and not do anything brainless to try and speed up this rebuild. The only other possible move that comes to mind that I didn't mention is cashing in on Jonas Valanciunas in a trade for some young assets only because he's making the most money on the team. But honestly, I really like what he's brought to this team, even if he isn't on the exact same timeline as the young core. So honestly, I think that this team should just go with what they have and try to get a couple more finishing pieces to complete their roster for the future. Just give it 2 years, maybe even less if they get the ideal free agents I mentioned, and this team could be in the position that the Utah Jazz are in right now. We already know that Ja Morant will be a superstar sooner rather than later. The question and X factor of this team is what Jaren Jackson Jr. will become in the next couple of years. Because if he takes a leap like Ja and becomes one of the top power forwards in the league, to say the least, the NBA will be in trouble. Thank you all so much for watching. Let me know down below what team's offseason preview you would like to see next. I'm thinking of the New York Knicks, but if you guys want to see another team, comment that down below. But if you did enjoy, it would mean the world if you dropped a like and subscribed if you're new and joined the Woods crew to help me get to 10K by the end of the year. But regardless, I really appreciate everyone still watching. I'll catch you on the next one. Woods out.